It's been a year since I sold my Lexus IS500. It was very similar to what we have in here. Red interior, caviar black exterior. And people keep asking me to this day, do I regret selling it? Now, before we answer that question, let's talk about what we have in here. This is the 2023 Lexus IS500. This has a few changes. First of all, this has, well, sort of a gunmetal gray wheels and blacked out a little bit at the same time. This comes with a sunroof. Everything else on the inside remains very much the same. Now that we have covered everything you need to know about the 2023 Lexus IS500, let's talk about why I sold my car. Now, a lot of you guys replied when I uploaded the video, and I understand that. Here's what I think after 1 year. This car, it's a grand touring car. It's a car for day to day, but it's not a car for the Canadian weather. It's a rear-wheel drive, and this will not do great as a daily for wintertime. I'm almost positive for that because it has so much weight into the front. On top of that, it is a full rear-wheel drive. Unless you are able to avoid driving this thing during very heavy snow days, it might do okay overall. But I do think that for our weather, this thing is not the best vehicle. Now, did I know that when I bought it? Of course I did. I knew that this was a rear-wheel drive. I knew this was a 5-liter. But I purchased this, and I know this is crazy to some of you, because I couldn't get a car from Lexus to review. And then I wanted to review this, and I also wanted to drag race it, which we did many times. And don't worry, because we'll be doing the same thing this week with this one specifically, more to come on that. But that was one of the reasons that I bought the IS500, was the fact that I couldn't get my hands on one, so I didn't have it as a press car. If I had had this as a press vehicle, I don't believe I would have bought it for myself, because I would have known exactly that this was not made for me. It's one of those situations where you don't click with a car. And this is the perfect example. It's not the car necessarily, but it's you as the individual, you as the buyer, you as the car guy. And that was the perfect example. One of the things that I didn't like about this is the fact that you pay so much money, yet it looks very much like an IS350. I cannot count the amount of times that people have sent me pictures thinking that was an IS500, but it was actually just a standard IS350. And I understand some of you guys commenting and saying that I'm looking for flashy vehicles. Not necessarily. Yes, I bought a gold M3, but I want something that when I'm looking at it, it looks like a performance vehicle. This has a few things, like the bulge in the front, the exhaust tips in the back, and that's it. That's the only way you'll know that this is an IS500. Those little things make this thing a performance vehicle. And that's another reason why I think this car was in the dealer's lot that I sold it to for 1 year and 1 month. Yes, my car that I sold it to a Toyota dealership was in their lot for 1 year and 1 month. Nobody wanted to buy, maybe because I did the review on it, but it wasn't the only vehicle. In fact, there were other IS500s that were not sold, and that one remained in the lot for, well, 1 year and almost 2 months till they sold it. Just recently, someone bought it because I haven't seen it in their listing on the website anymore. I don't think that it's a bad car. I don't think it's a bad looking car. In fact, I think the IS itself as a model looks really sexy on the outside. It has the lines from the headlights, the tail lights. It looks great. I'm not going to say that this car does not look great, because in fact it does. It's just one of those cars that I wish was a bit more spicy, a bit more different. And the whole point of this is that Lexus sells the IS500 as a performance vehicle. Therefore, try to add some of the performance lines on the outside so that it's different from the IS350. Another reason why I didn't click with this car was the fact that it doesn't sound good at all. In fact, last week I had the Lexus LC500. Sounds a lot better, and they have the exact same engine. So why is this different? I understand that this is a sedan, a family vehicle, and so on, but it doesn't sound good at all for a V8. It actually so muffled. It's so muffled, the sounds, that even when you are on the outside, you can't hear anything when you rev it at high RPM. Whether it's under load or just parked, this exhaust sound, it's not great. On top of that, I looked around to try to find an exhaust system, and the cheapest I could find was almost 4 grand, because they didn't make that many options for this thing. Now, the IS-F that was the previous model of this was a lot better in my opinion in terms of the exhaust sound. Although the beautiful red interior really makes this thing absolutely stunning on the inside, it's still a little bit outdated. What do I mean with that? Well, for example, there is no wireless charging pad. The touchscreen option is not as intuitive, although you do have that. I don't mind the trackpad. In fact, I think this is better than the Acura version. It does have ventilated seats, heated seats, and so on. But options like the 360 camera, this thing looks like it came from a car from 2009. It's not as advanced. It's been the same design for the past 7 years or so, some updates here and there, but it's pretty much the same thing. I don't even get a heads-up display with this option. Finally, this year they introduced a sunroof, now that I sold mine, because I'm a big fan of sunroofs. In the US, you get the rear sunshade, which of course is not offered for Canada. Like the little things here, the steering wheel, although it looks nice, the design looks very tacky for the car that costed me almost 80 grand Canadian, which would be about $70,000 US. The tachometer is still the same for the past 7 years or so. In fact, someone I know has a 2016 Lexus IS, and it looks exactly like this. When he jumped inside, he was shocked to see that it looked very much the same. But having said that, I do appreciate certain things for it. Like, for example, the fact that you're still getting buttons for your climate unit, for the heated seats, ventilated seats, and so on. You have a different option here for the driving modes, which is a nice touch. The design is very friendly, user interface is very friendly as well, easy to use. So overall, it's not bad, but it's not up to the German standards, for example, in my opinion. Now that we have covered all that and what I really think about this car, I want to answer a couple of the questions that you guys posted on my video. Let's talk about some of the complaints here. Okay. Seems odd to complain if you misunderstand it. Most of the complaints were things that you saw before you signed. It's a reliable car to own that makes the right noises and handles well, but it's comfortable sleeper. I could afford to daily a C7 or M5, but daily driving my ISF was less flashy and easier overall. It's nice to do triple digits without screaming about it. That being said, hope you find something you like. That's a very nice comment. So let's tackle some of the problems here. Most of the complaints were things you saw before you signed. I didn't get a chance to even test drive this car. So when I walked into the dealership, the dealer said you either take it or you leave it. So there was no such thing as test driving it. You had no option. I called all of them. In fact, this was during the time that people were selling cars. Well, dealers were selling cars over MSRP, but good news is that I didn't pay over MSRP. I would have never paid over MSRP. It's a reliable car. That's not the case here at all. In fact, my car was in the shop almost 6 times. You could use the argument that, well, it was just your car. In fact, there were so many others. People reached out to me on Instagram having the same issue. There's a gentleman, a buddy of mine, his name is Steven. He has an M3 xDrive and has an IS500 launch edition, and he needed an ECU. So it wasn't just my car. That's covered. It's reliable car to own, okay. Noises and handles well. Noises, not really. It doesn't sound that great. Handles well, yeah, I will say that. It has a really good traction off the line. In fact, this launches so well for a rear-wheel drive, and I've said this in the drag race video. It is a comfortable sleeper. It is comfortable, but it's not a sleeper. It's comfortable overall. The ride quality is great for a day-to-day, hence why I said it's a grand tourer. Except for one thing, fuel economy. The IS500 seems like the perfect daily driver. Large enough not to be cramped, yet small enough to be not for city driving. I agree. Yes, it's very spacious on the inside. For me, as someone that's 6'2", this was perfect. Fuel efficiency, not there. But you can never complain when you buy a 5-liter V8 sedan about fuel efficiency. But in case if you wanted to know, it's not fuel efficient. In fact, it's less fuel efficient in city drive than it is in highway, like most cars, because in highway this has an eco mode which turns off a couple of pistons. I think if he wanted more attention, he shouldn't have bought the car in a sleeper black. I saw a IS500 for the first time on the road, and I immediately knew, no K over there, just N-E-W, what it was. I spotted a slight hood bulge and more aggressive front and lower stance. A car enthusiast is going to spot that IS500 immediately in any color. No, I'm sorry. No, I even myself now, I question myself every time I see an IS350 if it's an IS500, especially if I'm not seeing it from the back sides. No car looks more beautiful than it is when it's with brighter colors. This car looks absolutely stunning. Not you are, but sure. Your color selection basically hides most of the design. It's true, black color on this car, it's not good. It hides pretty much everything. An orange one would be nice. The color makes a big difference for it to stand out. Absolutely agree on that. The IS500 is a solid touring car for everyday driving. However, the G80 M3 for the ultimate sedan driving experience. Totally agree on that. It's a good daily, but it's also a lot of money. Okay, Sam, I appreciate you sharing your experience with this car. Maybe you should test drive all the cars on your short list that you really like first. I'm not sure what you were expecting from a touring sedan with a V8. You have to know what you're buying before you buy it. Yes and no. You don't actually have to drive all of them, but some of these, well, let's put it this way. I watched a lot of videos about the IS500, and a lot of the reviews were very positive about this car, which blew my mind. Not a single complaint. Could also be that the fact that they went to a drive event. Seems like you bought for hype and realized later it wasn't for you. Glad you're selling it to someone who appreciates it for what it is. The only thing I agree with is the mirrors not folding. The rest of your complaints are things buyers of this car are appreciating about it. If that was the case, that car would have sold to a proper owner because it was sold to a dealer. I was told it was going to be an owner, but it was actually sold to a dealer because they didn't have inventory and they didn't sell it for a year and 2 months. So the car was sitting in their lots for a year and 2 months. I didn't lose any money. That was the most amazing thing about this car, because I ended up doing a bunch of videos, drag races, and I got all my deposit back, and the guy paid the entire loan on it. So I lost nothing. Some positive things about this experience. Putting together all your disappointments, your new sedan will be a red Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Yeah, it was almost the case. Almost, but then I backed out. It was just an issue. Except for the warranty issues, most of your criticism of the IS500 are just first world problems. Heads-up display, moonroof, brake calipers, badges, wireless charging, no one recognizes it's a special car. You'll probably be happier in an M3. You got that right. And that one got sold after a year or two. But it wasn't 2 months. Okay, an ISF owner. Coming from an ISF owner, I completely agree. The brakes and suspension alone are the biggest disappointment of the IS500. Also, I miss the look of the fender cutouts. Things like that. Now that we've covered everything we need to talk about this, let's go for a drive. And let me tell you what I really think about this IS500 now that I have driven it again after 1 year and 2 months. Let's go for a drive. Another thing I didn't like about this car is the fact that Lexus claims that this makes 472 horsepower out of the V8. And I can bet money on it, this doesn't make that. This makes about 430 brake horsepower, maybe 400, but definitely not 472. There's no way this makes 472. I can bet that if you put this on a dyno, this thing is overrated in horsepower. Most likely 420, 430, because I've driven so many cars, and some cars that have 472 horsepower have a lot more torque and power when you push it. This is not even close to that. And that's another disappointing thing. The other thing was the transmission, in my opinion. This car does not have the best transmission. It's so sluggish. Like, for example, you put it in Sport Plus. I'm going to leave the transmission into automatic mode. And one good thing about this is you can actually have the gear ratios in here. It says gear position. So it's fourth gear. I put my foot down. It takes time to drop the gears, because that's what good transmissions do. When you need the power, the gears drop so fast. This doesn't do that. In fact, the 10 speed in the LC500 that I drove recently is far better than this. And for a performance car, this should do better in my opinion. And to go back to the sound thing, it's definitely coming from speakers or the engine. I know Lexus has a bit of area here opened up to let that sound come through into the interior part so you can hear the engine a bit more, but that's it. Like, V8s have a deep sound. I'm not talking Charger-like, not a loudy, massive exhaust sound like a Charger. I'm talking about an exhaust that you can feel it, because that's the whole point of the entire experience, the entire excitement when you're driving a performance vehicle. I felt more excited on my 3-liter 6-cylinder BMW M3. Even the Focus RS with 4 cylinders was more exciting than this, in my opinion. People will have this argument, it's the V8, it's this and that. I get it. It's very exciting to have a V8 as a daily. The point is that, is it actually fast? And if you wanted to make it fast, the engine cannot take too much horsepower. There's not that many tuning options. Maybe now is a little bit different, but when I had it, I looked up around for a twin turbocharge kit, supercharger kit. None of those were available at that time. And there was one in the US that was able to go from the ISF into this. There were some modifications going through. That was $11,000 Canadian, which would be about like $8,000-9,000 US for a car to produce 100 horsepower more. Like, that is absolutely insane. It's ridiculous that you couldn't do it just with a couple of bolt-ons. It doesn't give you that option. And it was a bit disappointing in that perspective. I think this car is a good daily because it is comfortable, it's got the space, and it's got a little bit of power when you need it. Like, we did drag races with this thing, and it wasn't very impressive on a roll or from a dig for that matter. I'm not saying that you shouldn't buy this car. I'm saying that you should take this for a drive before you make your decision. And if there's a chance that you can, do it before you sign those papers, because now the market has gone down a bit. It's going to be a lot harder to sell in comparison. When I sold mine, it took about 3 days because the market was on fire. Dealers couldn't get cars. So I had 4 people lined up. 4 people lined up, literally throwing me money. I got my deposit back. I managed to do a bunch of videos with it. So I didn't come out with a big loss overall. That I must admit. The overall loss, actually there was no loss at all, because I was able to generate some revenue through the videos and all that through my channel. That's it. And the leasing rate at that time when I got mine was like 6.9, 7.9. Lexus had the highest, and the interest rate at that point wasn't even high in comparison to other cars. Like Ford was giving 2.5, 2.8, Lexus was giving 7.9. That was the only thing. But in terms of regretting selling it, nah, not a second. I don't even look back at it. I never look into websites if there's any available to buy, or even when I see one around, which I haven't seen that many, it doesn't really make me want to buy one back. There's only one car that I regret selling, and that's the Focus RS. That's it. That's the only one car to this day I regret selling badly. This, nah, not at all. It just wasn't for me.